Hi, I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, as the race for San Diego mayor heats up, we'll hear how much money has been raised so far. And demand for Apple's new operating system led to long waits around the world and in San Diego.
And San Diego Unified School District's new superintendent, Marten, has an update on new Common Core tests and how the district will spend its money this year. Then a new report on poverty in San Diego finds economic recovery bypasses the poor and middle class. Who's taking home the most money and how it impacts all levels of income earners. I'm Peggy Pico with those stories just ahead.
And a San Diego State professor has an objective way to test for concussions from the sidelines using software. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. Candidates, political parties, and other organizations raised and spent millions last year to determine San Diego's mayor. Now, they're at it again after Bob Filner resigned over sexual harassment claims. Joe Girardi, with our partner iNewsSource, joins us to explain some of the rules. When it comes to money in this race, Joe, what's new?
Well, the ground rules have changed a bit. Last year, individuals could give $500 to a campaign for the primary and $500 for the general election. This year, those limits have doubled to $1,000 per election. But while the limits have gone up, the disclosure requirements have gotten tougher. Candidates have to report within 24 hours contributions from anyone who's given at least $1,000.
At least $1,000. So tomorrow is a filing deadline. So who's raising the most so far?
As of this afternoon, only 3 leading candidates had reported any $1,000 donors. Republican Kevin Faulconer's raised $147,000, Democrat Nathan Fletcher $88,000, Democrat David Alvarez's way back was $7,000. I want to caution, though, that these figures are only a portion of campaigns fundraising so far in a race that's just getting started.
And Joe, what about donations from corporations or unions?
Corporations, unions, and other non-individuals are prohibited from donating to campaigns, but they can and will get involved in a big way through the use of independent committees. These committees can support or oppose candidates, but can't coordinate with their campaigns. And these committees may accept unlimited contributions from virtually anyone.
And of course, you're following the money. Where can folks go to keep track of all this?
Viewers can check out an interactive graphic and see who these donators are, updated every day at kpbs.org/follow.
iNewsSource reporter Joe Girardi. Now, Donna Fry is endorsing Councilman David Alvarez in the mayor's race. Fry served on San Diego City Council for 9 years. And environment attorney Marco Gonzalez is endorsing Nathan Fletcher. Fry and Gonzalez were 2 of the first to call for Filner's resignation after hearing from women who claimed they were sexually harassed by him. An Islamic civil rights group says there's been a slight drop in discrimination cases against Muslim Americans between 2011 and 2012. The group found dozens of examples of anti-Islam legislation. The Council on American Islamic Relations also reports more than 50 acts of arson and vandalism to mosques and legal challenges to keep them from being built across the U.S.
Just hanging out in the library for study hours for my fraternity, and while we were doing that, I was thinking about downloading the iOS 7, but it just kept saying try again later.
Yeah, that happened all over the place. Apple releasing its new operating system yesterday. Of course, college students wanted to check it out, but all those iPhone updates clogged campus internet connections. SDSU has temporarily blocked access to Apple download sites. The campus network was so sluggish, students weren't able to access grades or even turn in homework online.
The internet was not working on my laptop at all, or on my iPad later. Like at night, it didn't work at all, so I couldn't research for my paper or anything, which was kind of frustrating.
San Diego's interim mayor held his second weekly news conference since taking office. KPBS Metro reporter Sandia Dirks was at the mayor's office to hear what Todd Gloria had to say. She joins us with an update from the news center. Sandia, what did Gloria have to say about how the city is recovering from our summer of scandal?
Well, Well, Gloria says he's focused on the work of getting the city back on track and moving forward. So we talked about a little bit of everything. For example, what do food trucks, medical marijuana, and a Jack in the Box in North Park have in common? Well, according to the interim mayor, they have a lot in common. All are examples where former Mayor Bob Filner tried to get around a flawed law the back way. Gloria says in the case of food trucks on private property and medical marijuana, the right permitting and zoning isn't in place to have them operate legally in the city. And he says the way to get around bad policy is to change the policy, not ignore it like the previous administration.
You know, we are a city of laws, and we're going to follow the law. We will not selectively choose which ones to follow and which ones we won't. If we don't like the law, we're going to change it. And in each of those three instances, I don't care how we're currently organized, and I want to change it.
So does that mean he's going to push for new policy?
Yes, he says it's a priority. He wants to update the code in these cases to allow for the proper guidance for dispensaries and food trucks, as well as to change the laws that made it possible for that Jack in the Box to add a drive-through window. Also at the top of his priority list, visiting Washington and hiring new lobbyists to improve San Diego's reputation and reach outside the Sun Belt.
KPBS Metro reporter Sandia Dirks. Now, this is Cindy Martin's first semester as San Diego Unified's new superintendent. She joins Peggy Pico for a conversation about Common Core and new funding rules.
With more than 130,000 students, San Diego Unified School District enrolls 10% of the city's population. In her first year as superintendent, Cindy Marten leads the district in its transition to Common Core academic standards, new exam methods, and more local control over the district's $1 billion operating budget. Superintendent Cindy Marten, welcome back.
Thank you.
Now, San Diego Unified is an early adopter of the Common Core standards. How are you rolling them out this year?
We're really excited about the Common Core standards. To shift from the California standards, state standards, to the national standards, they offer us a greater degree of rigor. And so the way we're rolling it out is working with our principals on understanding what the Common Core standards mean and what shifts are going to be necessary in the classroom. So we're beginning with the principals understanding how to lead the instructional shifts that are necessary in the classroom, because it's really going to be about leadership of the communities and of the teachers.
Is it different for each school? Will the principals and the teachers have input on that?
No, the Common Core standards are already adopted. They're national standards. We understand what those standards are, but there's new teaching methods that are going to be needed in order to ask students to engage in real-world problem solving. So it's the instructional shifts that we're focusing on this year.
Yeah, I guess what I'm asking about that, are those instructional shifts going to be catered per school via the principal, or are they going to be across the board?
It's systemic. It's systemic. The work that I'm doing is monthly principals conferences, so our principals understand what's needed and how they can lead that in their schools.
Okay, well, tell us about the new test. And the standardized testing has to change because the curriculum, or at least the standards, are changing on how you teach. How are they different, or going to be different, than the standardized test being used?
Yeah, we're currently taking a bubble-in test. It's called the California Standards Test in the STAR reporting system. There's a recommendation on the governor's desk right now to suspend California Standards Test because we're teaching new standards, the new national standards. So at the end of next year, not this year, we'll be taking the new Smarter Balance Assessment. This year, what we're going to be doing is field testing the new test to make sure that the field test items, where this test is going to be rolled out in 26 states, we want to make sure that we're eliminating the biases going through the field test process.
And the difference, when you say the bubble test, we're talking about multiple exams, the way people used to do it. Now these new tests will be online, I understand.
Yes, yes.
So you're rolling them out at the end of this year. Is there enough computers and computer literacy to allow students here to do that?
That's where San Diego Unified is ahead. We actually are very far ahead. I've talked to you before about our digital literacy program. We have computers in our classrooms. We have one-to-one devices. So when students have to take the real tests at the end of next year, we'll field test this year, end of next year, they'll already have experience. They're already digital natives, we call it. They're using computers already, and just taking a test on the computer is one more tool that they'll use the computer for.
So you mentioned Governor Brown passing that bill to suspend multiple choice
exams. He hasn't signed it yet.
Yeah, he says he's going to,
okay.
and it's going to take effect immediately. Do you support that? And if you do, why?
I do support that, because what it does is it gives us an opportunity to begin to shift to I want to teach Common Core state standards, and I want to hold our schools accountable to teach the new higher level standards, and to take a test at the end of the year on the other standards doesn't make sense. I want to give our teachers the opportunity to teach the new standards, take the new field test, why would you take an old test? It's not that the scale of the new standards is not ready for us to stand on yet, so let us shift our instruction now, and when the new test is ready, we'll be ready for it. I really think it's a critical move for us to move to raise standards, teach with the freedom to teach in this new accountability system, and not be measured on a test that we're not even teaching to anymore.
Speaking of money,
yes.
California has a new funding formula that gives districts more control over their budget and a little bit more money. How is your district going to either redistribute or use that control over that money?
This is a transformational funding formula. What our governor has done is taken into account where we have a concentration of need, there's a concentration of dollars. So school districts are getting their base grant, their supplemental grant, and their concentration grant. What we're doing is working with our district relations office, making sure that we are engaging all stakeholder groups around local control, making sure that everybody has a voice in they're calling the LCAPs, the accountability plans, that the degree to which the state and the federal government hold us accountable for using these dollars well, we're holding ourselves accountable with interest groups, making sure they're saying what the needs are in their communities.
And we'll have to end on this, but I understand next week you're going to find out about taking home the largest education prize, which you've been nominated for here, the San Diego Unified School District has. Tell us about the prize and what it's for.
It's the Broad Prize, and San Diego Unified School District is so proud to have been recognized as one of the top 4 urban districts in the nation. This was not a prize that we applied for. This was the Broad Foundation looking at districts across the nation that are closing the achievement gap, and we rose to the top on that. And we are going to find out next week on Wednesday in Washington, D.C. if we're a finalist already. We'll find out if we were the winner.
All right. Well, good luck. Superintendent of San Diego Unified School District, Cindy Marten, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Concussions are a constant hazard in football, soccer, and a variety of other sports. Coaches and trainers are taught to recognize some of the warning signs, but it's not always easy to diagnose a concussion on the sidelines. A professor at San Diego State has developed a device that could provide a more objective way to detect whether an athlete has suffered a concussion. KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg has the story.
Rugby is what you would call a full contact sport. At San Diego State, members of the rugby team go through a series of brutal drills to get ready for the fall season. And if you think this is rough, you should see a game where practically anything goes. Training and conditioning coach Orrin Cottrett has played semi-pro rugby for years. In the heat of battle, he's gotten his front teeth knocked out and torn up his knee, not to mention numerous lacerations. And concussions? Don't ask.
Well, you definitely get a little dizzy, see some stars sometimes, depending on the severity of it.
But Cottrett says even when a player suffers a concussion, he usually wants to keep on playing.
This is one of the sports where we actually thrive on actually being very competitive, being very physical, and nobody wants to come out of a game in this kind of sport.
So if you get your head knocked around a little bit, you get dizzy, so what, right?
Yeah, shake it off, get back up.
But here's the problem. If a player goes back in too soon, they're at higher risk of getting a secondary concussion, and that can cause irreparable brain damage.
In the biomechanics lab at San Diego State, Professor Daniel Goebel tests his new device called B-Trax. It's designed to precisely measure an athlete's ability to maintain proper balance. Balance is one of the things that's affected when a person suffers a concussion.
The green line is a representation of his sway, so if he moves right, the line goes right. If he moves left, and so it's just tracking how much he sways, and we know that the more you sway, the worse your balance is.
On the sidelines of college and pro sports, athletic trainers do an assessment of players they suspect of suffering a concussion. They ask some questions, observe their behavior, and measure their balance. But the balance tests are highly subjective. Two trainers can come up with completely different results. One might keep a player off the field, while the other might let them go back in.
So what we wanted to do was create something that was objective. It took the trainer out of the mix, a device that could actually quantify the balance test by itself, come up with a number that anyone would get no matter who ran the test. And then we could be more confident that what we had was a good measure.
Okay, Jeff, so I'm going to have you put your hands on your hips, and you're going to look straight ahead and just try to hold your balance.
Goebel developed software that can interface with tablet computers to make the device easier to use on the sidelines. Goebel and his team are collecting balance data from 1,000 people. From that, they'll be able to tell what normal balance looks like without a head injury.
So you could compare somebody after a head injury to that normative database and figure out if they're outside of what normal balance is. But the best way to do it is to get their balance data before the head injury and compare them within themselves pre and post.
So that's exactly what Goebel is doing. He's using B-Tracks to measure the balance of SDSU's rugby team before the season starts. There's already a device like B-Tracks on the market, but at a cost of nearly $15,000, it's out of the price range of most school and youth sports teams. Goebel wants to sell B-Tracks for under $1,000. There are more than 300,000 sports-related concussions each year in the U.S. Scripps Health Dr. Sean Evans says a device that could help reduce the risk of secondary concussions would be terrific.
But there's no substitute for somebody who comes off the field and says, I'm a little dizzy, my head hurts, I don't feel quite right, I've got a little numbness. Or the person who just doesn't look quite right, doesn't respond to their coach, doesn't hear their name well, just doesn't feel quite right to their colleagues. There's no substitute for the insight there and saying, let's get that person out of play.
But what about preventing concussions in the first place? That's hard in rugby, where players don't wear helmets or any other protective gear. Strength coach Orrin Cottrett says if you want to stay safe, stay home.
There's danger in everything that you do every day. No matter what sport you play, there's always a risk involved, and that's why it's sport.
Kenny Goldberg, KPBS News.
U.S. Census Bureau figures out this week show 1 out of 6 families in California fall below the federal poverty line. But what does that really mean? Peggy Pico breaks down the numbers in San Diego.
More than 1 million people in San Diego County live in economic hardship at or below double the federal poverty rate. That staggering statistic is from an income and earnings report released today by the Center for Policy Initiative. Here with details are the center's research director, Peter Brunel, and Murtaza Baksamusa with the Middle Class Taxpayers Association. Welcome.
Thank you.
Peter, explain for us what the income levels and federal guidelines are for poverty levels here in the United States.
Sure. So they're set at the federal level. There's one number. Well, there's a number of numbers depending on family size, but they're set at the national level. For one single person, they're a little under $12,000 in annual income. For a family of 2 with 2 children, they're just a little over $23,000 annually.
And so here in San Diego, how many people, as opposed to living in hardship, are living at this poverty level or below?
So there's about 465,000 people living at or below the federal poverty level in San Diego County.
Okay. Murtaza, your analysis of the census report found some key facts that I want to just highlight quickly here about the high number of San Diegans living really in poverty, almost half a million here. Income equality was one of them. 20% of San Diego's wealthiest households took home half of all income in the region, and there was a drop in the real median income for all households last year. The working poor, a little more than 28% of San Diego's full-time employees, and nearly 100,000 part-time workers earn less than $30,000 a year. And poverty demographics, in addition to children's groups hit hardest by poverty with rates of 20% or higher, include African Americans, Latinos, and the cities of El Cajon, San Marcos, and Escondido. So my question for you is, how does this breakdown actually impact the middle class or all of San Diego for that matter?
Peggy, the median income in San Diego is at $60,000. Now, think about it. For a quarter of a century, we've been stuck in the neutral on an uphill climb. So therefore, what that means is difficulty for families in trying to make ends meet in terms of housing, medical costs, and childcare. It's also difficult for the economy in trying to recover it because these families go out and spend money, and it's also bad for the tax base. So at this point, there is no economic recovery for the middle class in San Diego.
Well, I know that the California legislature just passed a bill to raise the minimum wage in the state to $10 an hour by 2016. Peter, let me start with you. Do you think that will impact poverty levels?
It will help. It's definitely a step in the right direction. You know, many of the people that work in our tourism industry, for example, earn wages below $10 an hour. There's a couple of things. One is, as you said, it's not phased in completely until January of 2016, so there's still sort of a short-term problem for a lot of those people. And there's a lot of people that it won't do enough for, just because 10 still isn't really enough to meet the full economic needs of many families. And the other problem that people face is that a lot of people who make minimum wage, sort of are forced into part-time by their employers. They would like to work full-time, but they're what's called involuntary part-time. So, they'll make a little bit more, but it won't have the full impact it would if they had full-time jobs.
Do you think that would help here in San Diego, at least sort of ease bringing up our median income here?
I think that this was a signature accomplishment of this legislature in increasing the poverty rate to $10, because a quarter of the hourly workforce is at or below $10. Think about it. Out of these 460,000 people in poverty, about 200,000 of them are working. They're working. They're out of the rest are children. And they are not able to make ends meet. They are below poverty level. If Assembly Bill 10 goes into effect today, that is, every worker gets a raise to $10, that would help 160,000 workers in San Diego get a raise.
So it might have some trickle impact here. Peter, we're going to end on this. What needs to be done maybe at a policy level or at a different level besides this that could help improve poverty rates here in San Diego and throughout the state?
Well, I mean, anything that helps improve wages for low-wage workers. So, that like we said, that's a step in the right direction. There are some industries that are paying, somewhere between 10 and what it really costs to live here, and any sort of policies that we can focus on to boost the wages of those workers, and to make sure that people have full-time work when they want it. Those are two steps in the right direction.
All right, thank you both so much for this update. There's a whole lot of information and your report on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks again.
Thank you, Peggy.
People who are obese are less likely to survive cancer, and one reason may be the quality of their care. As Cindy Sharp with the Associated Press reports, nearly 40% of overweight cancer patients do not get enough chemotherapy.
Obesity and cancer can be a deadly combination. Statistics have shown the obese are less likely to survive.
You hear chemo and you don't know what's going to happen.
But now doctors may know one reason why obese cancer patients die at a higher rate than thinner ones. There's a surprising inequality in the care they receive.
A substantial proportion of patients receiving chemotherapy who are overweight or obese are underdosed, undertreated.
Studies suggest as many as 40% of obese patients get less than 85% of the full chemo dose. Doctors often measure medication based on ideal, not actual body weight, or cap the dose fearing heavy patients can't handle it. But other studies have found
if you dose obese patients based on their actual body weight, they have no more side effects, in some studies actually less side effects than healthy weight patients.
The research prompted the American Society of Clinical Oncology to adopt guidelines for weight-based chemo dosing for the obese. But not all doctors are aware of the changes. Luckily, those at Duke University were when treating Tracy Smith, an obese breast cancer survivor.
I'm sure they gave me the right amount for my body weight.
She says cancer patients should ask questions if they're concerned.
There are no stupid questions, especially when it comes to your health.
And there may no longer be a one-size-fits-all approach to chemo. Cindy Sharp, Associated Press.
Drivers for web-based car-sharing companies will have to undergo training and criminal background checks. California regulators approved the new rules today, which also require drivers have commercial liability insurance. The new rules will affect companies such as Lyft and Sidecar, who rely on smartphone apps for riders with drivers who actually use their own vehicles. Now, the new rules are meant to level the playing field with traditional taxi services. San Diego's Rolando neighborhood has rolling hills and quaint walkways that connect the community to the canyons. Ken Kramer tells us more about the area in tonight's About San Diego.
Newspaper ad, 1920s, and the eyes of the world were on San Diego, right down there among those rolling hills between El Cajon Boulevard and University Avenue.
They advertised that, in fact, that this was going to be the new city between two highways.
And as an additional bit of elegance and sophistication that would set it apart from other communities in San Diego, they added a really nice touch. See it on the map here? A couple of little lines connecting up one street with another. There are 8 or 9 of them like this, but when you see them, what they actually are is walkways, just big enough for a couple of people to walk side by side. Historian Jim Newland knows them all and where they go.
It's just a wonderful sort of escape to be able to kind of walk down these wonderful little quaint walkways and get up and down the canyons and experience the neighborhood.
And you think about how these streets were laid out among those rolling hills. You'd have to hike a pretty long distance all the way around just to get to the next street over. Good thing they built the walkways.
To link the rolling canyons.
Most of them are ramps with a gradual slope and easy walk.
But in some cases the elevation change required stairs. And they had with the hand guards and the whole thing.
And by the way, all this rolling land, they were trying to sell houses here. How much more Spanish and romantic it would sound if they gave it a Spanish feel. So they hosted a barbecue prepared by the well-known Spanish chef Senor Ramirez and called the whole area Rolando, where your neighbors were just an easy walk away, where life was good, and where all you had to do was look in the paper to see the eyes of the world were focused on that fact about San Diego.
Pleasant weather for your neighborhood as we head into the weekend. Morning clouds and partial clearing along the coast, low 70s over the next few days. Mid to low 80s inland with sunshine in the afternoon. Plenty of sunshine in the mountain areas through Saturday, mild temperatures. And falling below 100 this weekend for the official start of fall on Sunday. You can find tonight's stories and download the KPBS app, all on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Good night.